On social media, the Watts family looked like the epitome of happiness. In photos and videos, Shanann Watts is laughing, and her husband Chris is smiling, holding their two little girls, Bella and Celeste. They're playing in parks, opening Christmas presents. They look perfect. In one video, Shanann's voice is filled with love. He was the one for me, and he is amazing, and I can't tell you how wonderful he is. But then the picture shatters. Suddenly, we see Chris Watts on his porch, talking to a news camera, his face a mask of strained worry. I just want them back. I just want them back. But he was the one who took them away. On Facebook, Chris Watts was a perfect, doting dad. His page was a gallery of a blissful family life. A loving husband to his beautiful wife, Shanann, and a hands-on father to their two bright-eyed daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste. To the world, they were living the American dream in their spacious Colorado home. But behind the loving smiles and cheerful posts, Chris Watts was living a dark double life. He was a man tangled in a web of lies, hiding a secret that was growing more monstrous by the day. This is the chilling story of how that secret life violently crashed into his public one, ending not just in a broken marriage, but in the complete annihilation of his own family. A story that starts, as so many do, with what looked like a picture-perfect life. Shanann Watts was a force of nature. On her Facebook profile, which had thousands of followers, she documented her life with a vibrant, relentless optimism. She shared everything: the highs, the lows, her struggle with lupus, and her success as a promoter for the company Lavelle. Her posts painted a picture of a woman deeply in love with her family. In video after video, she couldn't stop gushing about her husband, Chris. I just want you to know a little bit of my story, she says in one clip. I went through one of the darkest times of my life, and then I met Chris, and he's the best thing that has ever happened to me. Their love story, as Shanann told it, was a fairy tale. They met in 2010 after Chris sent her a friend request on Facebook. He was quiet and shy, a grounding force for her energetic personality. He was, in her words, her rock. She was a dreamer who pushed the family forward. He was a silent partner, the supportive husband who seemed happy to let her shine. They married in 2012 and their family grew. First came Bella, a thoughtful, sweet little girl. Then came Celeste, or Cece, a firecracker full of energy. The family photos from this time are a study in domestic bliss. Matching outfits, birthday parties, and family vacations. In June of 2018, just a few months before it all fell apart, Shanann posted a video of Bella singing a song she wrote for her dad. My daddy is a hero. He helps me grow up strong, she sang. My daddy, daddy, I love you. The image they projected was powerful and deeply convincing. Shanann was building a brand around her life, and her family was a star. They had overcome financial hardship, including a 2015 bankruptcy, and seemed to be thriving. Shanann was earning a luxury car and incentive trips through her work. Chris had a steady job as an operator for Anadarko Petroleum, a major oil and gas driller. In late May 2018, Shanann shared the most exciting news of all. In a video she recorded, she wore a t-shirt that read, "Oops, we did it again." She filmed Chris walking to the door, his face breaking into a slow, happy smile as he realized she was pregnant. They were having a boy, and they planned to name him Nico. Shanann was overjoyed. I miss and love you so much, she texted Chris just weeks before her death. I am still in shock that we are having a little boy. I am so excited and happy. To anyone scrolling through her feed, the Watts family didn't just look happy. They looked perfect. But the reality of their lives was far different. A deep crack had formed in the foundation of their marriage, and was about to bring the entire house crashing down. The perfect family facade began to crumble in the summer of 2018. Shanann and the girls went on a 5-week trip to visit family in North Carolina, while Chris stayed behind in Colorado. It was during this time that the distance between them grew into a canyon, and it was during this time that Chris Watts began his affair. Her name was Nicole Kessinger. She was a co-worker at Anadarko, and Chris started a physical relationship with her in early July. To Kessinger, Chris presented himself as a man about to get a divorce. He was soft-spoken, a good listener, and he told her his separation was nearly final. He lied about everything, even telling her his divorce was finalized at the end of July. They started seeing each other 4 or 5 times a week. This new relationship seemed to consume Chris. He started working out obsessively, losing weight and focusing on his appearance. He was pulling away from his life with Shanann and stepping into a new one with Kessinger. The affair wasn't just a fling, it was his escape route. As prosecutors would later argue, Chris saw a fresh start, and his family was now just an obstacle. Shanann felt the shift the moment she returned to Colorado in early August. The quiet, supportive husband she left behind was gone. In his place was a man who was distant, cold, and emotionally gone. Her worried text to friends from this time: "Show a woman in turmoil. He has changed. I don't know who he is," she texted a friend on August 7th. "What if he really doesn't love me anymore?" She confronted him, asking if there was someone else. He denied it. She told a friend that Chris said they weren't compatible anymore, that he didn't want the new baby, and that he refused to go to counseling. Shanann was fighting for her marriage, but she was fighting alone. Chris had already checked out. On the weekend of August 10th, Shanann left for a short business trip to Arizona. It was the last trip she would ever take. She landed back in Colorado in the early hours of Monday, August 13th. Her friend Nicole Atkinson dropped her off at home around 1:48 a.m. Atkinson watched as Shanann walked through her front door, disappearing into the dark house where her husband and 2 daughters were. Later that day, Nicole grew concerned. Shanann, who was 15 weeks pregnant, missed a doctor's appointment. She wasn't answering her phone or texts, which was highly unusual. Around 12:10 p.m., a worried Nicole went to Watts' house. The house was locked and quiet, but Shanann's car was in the garage. This wasn't right. Nicole called the police to request a welfare check. When an officer arrived, Chris Watts had also just gotten home. On the officer's body camera, Chris appears cooperative, but his behavior is bizarrely detached. He lets the officer into the tidy house. Shanann's phone, purse, and keys are on the counter. Her wedding ring is on the nightstand. The bed in the master bedroom is stripped of its sheets. Chris told the officer that he and Shanann had an emotional conversation around 5 a.m. where he told her he wanted to separate. He claimed that when he left for work a little after 5 a.m., Shanann was in bed. He suggested she might have taken the girls to a friend's house. But as the hours ticked by, his story started to fall apart. Shanann and her 2 little girls had vanished. In the days after his family's disappearance, Chris Watts played the part of the distraught husband. He spoke to local news, standing on his front porch and pleading for their return. "Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring them back." But to trained observers, his performance was unconvincing. Body language experts later pointed to a strange smirk at odd moments and speech patterns that screamed deception. While his words begged for their return, his body seemed to betray him. The investigation quickly intensified, with the FBI joining the search on August 15th. Detectives dug into the couple's life, uncovering the marital stress and Chris's affair, which he had initially denied. As they peeled back the layers of the perfect family, a much darker picture emerged. A crucial piece of evidence came from a next-door neighbor whose security camera was pointed at the Watts' driveway. The footage from the morning of the disappearance directly contradicted Chris's story. At 5:27 a.m., Chris's truck is seen backing up to the garage. He's seen loading items into the cab. He told police he was just loading his work tools, but the footage suggested something much more sinister. It proved that whatever happened to his family, it happened before he left for work. The pressure on Chris was mounting. Investigators saw the holes in his story and asked him to take a polygraph test. Believing he could outsmart it, he agreed. It was a huge mistake. On August 15th, just 2 days after his family vanished, Chris sat for the exam. The questions were direct. Did you physically cause Shanann's disappearance? Are you lying about the last time you saw her? The polygraph indicated deception on every crucial question. With a final score of -18, a catastrophic failure, the machine had caught him. After the test, investigators confronted him. "You did not pass," one agent said. Chris's calm facade finally cracked. He knew the game was up. Still, He tried to spin one last, desperate lie. He admitted to the affair. Then he asked to speak to his father. In a room with his father, with investigators listening in, Chris confessed. But it wasn't the whole truth. It was a twisted version designed to make himself look like a victim. He told his father that yes, he had killed Shanann, but claimed he only did it after she had murdered their daughters. He claimed that after he told Shanann he wanted to separate, he saw her on the baby monitor strangling Celeste, while Bella was already lifeless in her bed. In this story, he flew into a rage and strangled Shanann in retaliation. It was a monstrous lie, a final betrayal that tried to blame his murdered wife. But for investigators, it was enough. They had a confession to one murder, and they now knew where to find the bodies. Chris Watts was arrested later that night. With a partial confession, Chris Watts guided investigators to Survey 319, a remote oil site owned by his employer. There, they spotted a bedsheet matching the ones missing from the master bedroom near a patch of freshly disturbed earth. On the evening of August 16th, the grim discoveries began. Shanann Watts, 15 weeks pregnant with her son Nico, was found buried in a shallow grave. The search then turned to the massive crude oil tanks. The oil had to be drained from the 2 tanks, where Chris said he'd put his daughters. The bodies of 3-year-old Celeste and 4-year-old Bella were found submerged in the toxic sludge. They had been there for 4 days. The autopsy would later reveal that the girls had been forced through an 8-inch hatch at the top of the tanks. Bella even had scratches on her body from being shoved through the small opening. The girls had been smothered to death. Shanann had been strangled. Chris was charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder. For months, he stuck to his lie that Shanann was responsible for the girls' deaths. But the evidence told a different story. Faced with the death penalty, Chris's defense team negotiated a plea deal. On November 6, 2018, he pleaded guilty to all 9 counts against him, finally admitting he alone was responsible. Shanann's family agreed to the deal to avoid a long, painful trial. On November 19, 2018, Chris Watts was sentenced. The courtroom was filled with raw grief. Shanann's father, Frank Rizasek, spoke directly to him. "I trusted you to take care of them, not kill them," he said, his voice thick with pain. The judge called the crimes the most inhumane and vicious he had ever seen. He sentenced Chris Watts to 5 life sentences without parole, 3 consecutive and 2 concurrent, plus an additional 48 years for the unlawful termination of pregnancy, and 36 years for tampering with a deceased body. But the full story still hadn't been told. That came in a 5-hour prison interview on February 18, 2019. In a cold, detached voice, Chris Watts recounted the final horrific moments. He confessed that after Shanann got home, he told her he didn't love her anymore. After their argument, he went downstairs, but then came back to their bedroom, straddled Shanann, and strangled her to death. As this was happening, his daughter Bella walked in. "What is wrong with Mommy?" she asked. He then wrapped Shanann in a bedsheet and loaded her into his work truck. His 2 little girls, still alive, got into the truck with him for the 45-minute drive to the oil site. Once there, he pulled Shanann's body from the truck. He then took the blanket that Celeste always carried and smothered her in the back seat as her sister Bella watched. He put Cece's body in an oil tank. He then returned to the truck. He told investigators that Bella, in a soft voice, asked him, "Is the same thing going to happen to me as Cece?" Her last words, as her father moved toward her with that same blanket, were a heartbreaking plea, "Daddy, no." He smothered her, too, and put her body in the second tank before burying his wife. He claimed he just snapped, but his actions, the lies, the calculated disposal of the bodies, the immediate performance of the news cameras, spoke of a cold, deliberate plan to erase his family so he could start a new life. With his full confession, the world finally had the sickening truth. The motive, as the district attorney explained, was as simple as it was selfish. Chris Watts wanted a fresh start. His affair had shown him a life free from the responsibilities of being a husband and father, and he was willing to do the unthinkable to get it. The murder sent shockwaves far beyond Colorado. The family home became a memorial, piled with flowers, stuffed animals, and heartbreaking notes from strangers. The case exploded in the media, captivating and horrifying the public. How could a man who seemed so loving be capable of such brutality? It tapped into a deep fear that the person you trust the most could be your greatest danger. Shanann's family was left to navigate an ocean of grief. Her mother, Sandra Visek, said at his sentencing, "We loved you like a son. We trusted you. You took my whole world." In prison, Chris Watts will spend the rest of his life. He was moved to a maximum security facility in Wisconsin for his own safety. Reports claim he has found religion and is filled with remorse. He reportedly keeps pictures of his family in his cell and talks to them every day. In his prison confession, he said he hears Bella's last words, "Daddy, no," every single day. But for many, these expressions of guilt ring hollow. Just another performance from a master deception. The case has been analyzed by psychologists who note traits of narcissism and an inability to handle conflict. He was a people pleaser who avoided confrontation at all costs, bottling up his resentment until it exploded in the most horrific way imaginable. He didn't know how to leave his wife, so he eliminated her and the children who tied him to that life. The story of the Watts family is a tragedy born from a lie. It began with the curated illusion of a perfect life and ended in a desolate oil field. It's a story about the darkness that can hide behind a smiling face. Chris Watts wasn't a monster who appeared overnight. He was a man who made a series of choices. The choice to have an affair, the choice to lie, and finally, the choice to murder. He chose his own selfish desires over the lives of the three people who loved him most. The question that remains is how? How does a man who calls his daughters his heroes become the man who smothers them with their favorite blanket? How does a husband who calls his wife his rock become the man who strangles her in their bed? The truth is, there may not be a satisfying answer. This case forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. That evil isn't always obvious. It doesn't always wear a menacing scowl. Sometimes, it wears the face of a loving father and a doting husband. The story of Chris Watts is a chilling reminder that the line between protector and destroyer can be terrifyingly, incomprehensibly thin. The Watts family murders remain one of the most shocking cases in recent American history. If you found this analysis compelling, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into complex true crime cases. If you or someone you know is in a situation involving domestic violence, please know that help is available. We'll leave resources in the description below. Thank you for watching.